in just a moment. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you to those of you joining us live for today's Lunch and Learn, what's on the November ballot and Maine's new online voter registration system. And thanks to everybody who is watching this recording. As Election Day approaches, it is important to learn what's on the ballot and to ensure that your vote will count. The presidential election is at the top of everyone's minds, but what else is on the ballot? What other candidates and key issues will we get the chance to vote on November 5th? And what do you need to know about Maine's online voter registration portal? How to cast an absentee ballot? When to expect election results? And more. Whether you are voting for the first time this year, congratulations, or are a seasoned voter, this is important, exciting information, and we could not have a better guest today than Maine Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows. Secretary Bellows is Maine's 50th Secretary of State and the first woman to hold this position. She has served in the Maine State Senate, led the American Civil Liberties Union of Maine, and has long been a champion for everything from increased cybersecurity to marriage equality to voting rights. She's also one of the most inspiring, personable leaders I know, and it is an honor and a delight to welcome her today. My name is Kathleen Meal. I am the Senior Director of Policy and Partnerships here at Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. Our organizations represent more than 13,000 members and supporters dedicated to building a just, thriving future for all by acting on the climate crisis, protecting the environment, and safeguarding our democracy. MCA does that by bringing people and organizations together to educate, inspire, and advocate, and MCV by advocating for equitable policies, holding elected officials accountable, and winning elections. Since 2020, this weekly online Lunch and Learn series has helped us advance all of those goals, creating a shared space to explore our environmental and social history, policy priorities, climate action movement, and more. A few notes before we dive into today's program. We will hear from Secretary Bellows first and then tackle your questions in the Q&A session at the end. You don't have to wait, though. You can send questions to me or to Maggie Summers through the chat whenever they occur to you. We'll synthesize and ask as many as possible following the presentation. We ask that you not message Secretary Bellows directly so she can keep her focus on the presentation, not the chat box. And if you have any technical difficulties, Maggie is the one to help you out. Just send her a quick message through the chat. This event is being recorded and the video will be posted on our website later this afternoon. You can also find recordings of all of our programs on YouTube, where there are a bunch of different playlists that can help you focus in on the topics you're most interested in. Finally, at its core, voting is about the right to self-determination, an inherent right that the state of Maine continues to deny to the Wabanaki nations. The Wabanaki people are the original inhabitants of this land, yet they did not have the right to vote in local, state, and federal elections until 1954. This is not ancient history. In the century since Congress passed the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, states, including Maine, have maintained or erected numerous barriers that suppress voter turnout among tribal citizens. Legislation suppressing the right to vote often purports to be neutral, but research and experience show that requirements around state IDs, traditional addresses, ballot collection and drop-off, and more disproportionately impact certain populations, including tribal citizens. As we learn together today about what's on the ballot on November 5th, let's also commit to making sure that all people in the land we now call Maine and beyond can exercise our voting rights. Secretary Bellows, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. And thank you for that beautiful land acknowledgement and acknowledgement of voting rights. Such intention and thoughtfulness there, and I completely concur. It is wonderful to be with all of you in this virtual room today. Maine Conservation Voters does amazing work in advancing the right to vote and supporting and protecting our elections statewide. So I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So let's get started. I'm going to chunk my talk up into 4 parts. We're going to talk about voter registration and the new online voter registration portal. We're going to talk about what's on the ballot. The candidates, I'm not going to go into very much detail. I'm hopeful that you're all familiar, but I am going to go into detail about our referendum ballot. Then we're going to talk about voting, all of the ways one can cast their ballot and all of the checks and balances that ensure that every eligible Maine citizen has that right to vote and is able to exercise that right appropriately. And finally, we're going to close it out with talking about counting the votes, right? We're going to talk about election certification and the Electoral College. And then we'll be thrilled to take your questions, directed, of course, through Kathleen and Maggie, that I will then do my best to answer. So let's start with a voter registration. I am hopeful that if all of you are taking your lunch hour out to be with us in this lunch and learn, that you are registered to vote. Now, we recently in September, we celebrated National Voter Registration Day. And I like to say every day is voter registration day in Maine because, of course, we have same day voter registration. You can go to the polls, including on election day on November 5th, and register to vote and cast your ballot on the same day. And I truly think same day voter registration is why Maine is traditionally at the top of the nation in voter participation. The 2 states that go back and forth, Maine and Minnesota. Minnesota was number 1 in 2020. We were number 1 in 2022. What do we have in common besides being M states with beautiful lakes? We are both states with same day voter registration, and we've had that in place since 1973. That's a traditional way to register, right? In person, bringing your proof of identity and your proof of residency, which are 2 criteria for the right to vote. You must be a citizen. You must be at least 18 by election day, November 5th. So if your birthday is on November 5th, lucky you, you can vote. And you must be a resident of our state, meaning you're living here in our state. And you have to show that with identity and residency in some form. You can do that in person, as I mentioned, or you can do it at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. That was a new innovation we started in 2022. If you're going in already to get a state license or a state ID, you will already have to demonstrate your identity and residency to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and we are automatically offering everyone who has demonstrated their citizenship to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles that opportunity to update their voter registration if they've moved recently, or to register to vote for the first time if they're a young person or new to the state. We're really excited and proud of that system. I am even more excited, I have to say, by our new online voter registration system. Now, this is a system that Maine Conservation Voters was instrumental in having passed into law by the legislature and signed by the governor and funded adequately so that I and my team could implement it. And we launched this in February. It's working really well. You can check it out at maine.gov/vote. And I'm going to share my screen for 1 minute so you can see that portal. on my screen. There it is, the beautiful maine.gov/vote. This is our new online voter registration service. And you'll see there are two aspects of the portal. At the top, it's your standard registered Maine voter. You're living here in the state now. That may be someone who's attending school at one of our wonderful 2-year or 4-year colleges or universities. It may be someone who's a retiree. Anybody living here in the state of Maine can use this portal for registering as a Maine voter for the first time, or updating your existing voter registration, or maybe you want to change your party enrollment. You can do all of that right here. And I, just for fun, I'm going to click the button just so you get a sense of what it looks like inside. We're not going to go all the way through it today. But first are the standard questions, right? The very first question: are you a citizen of the United States? You have to affirm yes, and you have to be a United States citizen to vote. If you're not, it is, of course, a felony and a deportable offense. If you click no, you will not be able to proceed. That'll be the end of it. You click yes, and then you have to be 18 years old. If you click no, say you're 16 or 17, then it's, are you at least 16 years? Why does it say that? Because Maine allows for pre-registration of our 16-year-olds. And this is a program we advertise very heavily in the high schools, because we want our 16-year-olds and our 17-year-olds to get registered so they'll be ready, not this election, but in the future. And it gives them a second bonus. They can be poll workers. And some of our clerks are partnering with our high schools. Bangor and Waterville both do this, where high school students will sometimes volunteer as poll workers at the polls. But those 16-year-olds who are poll workers have to pre-register to vote. So you have to click, and once you click that you're 18, it grays out the button on 16. So there's no duplication there. And then you can continue, you're on your way. You have to say that you're a human. So no bots registering in Maine. And then you can go through the voter ID, voter information, address, party enrollment. You get a last chance to review your registration at the end, and you're on your way. I'm going to stop sharing now, but again, that URL is maine.gov/vote. Actually, I'm going to go back to the original maine.gov/vote, because you might have seen a second feature there. And that is, what if you are someone who is a Maine resident, but you're serving in the military overseas? Or maybe you're doing what I did when I was younger. I was a Peace Corps volunteer living abroad. Or maybe you're doing what I did in college when I studied abroad in Costa Rica. You can register as a Maine uniform service or overseas voter. The uniform service, of course, are people serving in our military. That includes not only people who are actually overseas in Europe or Asia, but members of the military who might be deployed elsewhere in the country. They may be serving at a base elsewhere, but they are Maine residents and they intend to return home to Maine when they are done with their service. You can register as what's called a Yokava. We call them Yokava voters. So again, you can see the criteria: uniform service voters who are currently living away from their Maine residence, or overseas voters who are US citizens currently living outside the United States and meet those Maine residency requirements. Now, if you're unsure, you click there to see the requirements, or you can go through that portal. So I love this system, and I know probably most people on this call are right here in our state. They're not living overseas, but you might have someone in your life, a student who's studying abroad, a member of your family who's serving in the military, or State Department or Peace Corps. Let them know about maine.gov/vote, because this overbroad option does allow for electronic delivery of a ballot and electronic return of a ballot, if that is something that the voter prefers. Now, there are a few, I'm going to stop sharing. I just want to talk about deadlines for a second. That online voter registration. So what's to stop a cyber criminal or a foreign adversary from flooding that online portal with false information? the ultimate backstop, the ultimate check and balance, the reason our elections are so free, safe, and secure is our local clerks and registrars. So we haven't replaced the role of the registrar in our municipalities and their review of that information. They're looking at every single application that comes in, whether it's coming from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles or whether it is coming through the online portal. They're looking at all of the information in that application. They're verifying that the voter has demonstrated to the satisfaction of the registrar their identity, their residency, that they have affirmatively verified that they're a citizen and that they're 18 years old or will be are appropriately eligible to register. So that's what protects us from any sort of fraud or just innocent mistakes by a voter. So that is that role of the registrar. And the registrar has something that's really important for voters to know as well. So we've had a few people, they put their information in the portal and then the next day they're like, well, wait a second, I didn't get any confirmation that I'm registered yet. It's a process and there is a human behind that process. And what they're doing is they're looking at that information and then they're sending out to each voter that registers a voter registration acknowledgement notice. This is an official form. It's used in all 50 states. It's called we call it a VRAN in the industry. This VRAN is a paper notice that goes out to the voter confirming that the registration was successful and that you're a registered voter. Or say you go through the system, but you don't upload everything that you're supposed to, or the registrar sees some sort of irregularity in the registration and believes it's not valid, or there's a missing piece of information, the VRAN will say your registration has been rejected, and this is why. We need you to bring that proof of identity or that proof of residency when you come to the polls on election day, and we'll get you squared away. Or come and do it earlier. So you're going to get a notice from the clerk. So we always tell people, don't just keep hitting the portal day after day after day after day. If you do it once, you're good. You're going to get a notice in the United States mail. Now, granted, the United States mail is experiencing some significant delays here in our state this year, but you will get that confirmation, and it one way or another. And because of same-day voter registration, worst case scenario, you'll be able to register on election day. So that's voter registration. Now, what's on the ballot for all of you? Oh, one more thing on voter registration. You cannot register in the name of another. So you might have a son or daughter overseas and you think they don't really have their act together, but you know their social security number, you know their driver license number, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go in and do my son or daughter's information. That would be a crime. Do not do it. And so you can gently or not so gently nag that loved one in your life to really get registered and make their plan to vote, but they, the voter, must do it. So moving on to what's on the ballot. All right. We are so excited. So there will be at least two ballots coming to you. Now, the Secretary of State's office does not administer municipal elections, so there may be a municipal ballot in your municipality, whether if there's, a city council or school board or local questions on your ballot, you're going to get a municipal ballot from the municipal clerk. But for the state election, there will be two ballots. One will be a candidate ballot, and you will see on the candidate ballot, it'll be two-sided. So one side are your standard traditional races, in a sense, your state legislative races, any county races that are pursuant to you. On the other side, you will see the presidential and federal races that are a ranked choice voting ballot. So that's going to look just like it did in 2020, right? There are 5 candidates for president. Those are going to be listed in a column, and then you'll see first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice, fifth choice. And sixth choice for the write-in. You can pick just one, right? Say you know who you want to vote for, and you just fill in that first choice for that one candidate. That counts. You can pick the same one all the way across the ballot. you really want to make sure that every single choice is just that candidate, you can do that. There's no extra credit. They don't get extra points. But that is a valid way to mark a ballot. Or you can pick a first choice and then a second choice and then a third choice and rank your candidates. What you can't do is have two firsts. You can't have a tie vote. You also cannot, if you're going to rank multiple columns, don't skip two columns because you're effectively exhausting your ballot. So those are the do's and the don'ts of the ranked choice voting ballot that you will see for President, US Senate, and Congress for both congressional districts, because there are declared write-ins in both districts. What's a declared write-in, you might say? A declared write-in is someone who has submitted to our office that they want to be a write-in. They consent to run. They would accept the office should they get it. Under Maine law, only declared write-ins are counted. Votes for declared write-ins are counted. Votes for anyone else, say you're like a pox on all of their houses. I am voting for Mickey Mouse. Not going to count it. You want to put a slogan, support Maine conservation voters instead of president. Not going to happen. You want to vote for Kathleen Meal for president. It doesn't count. So just word to the wise, Maine has a declared write-in law. The only write-ins that will be tallied and published are write-ins that were previously declared. All other votes get counted as blank in that column. So let's move over to the second ballot. There is a second full ballot, 5 questions, and the order of those questions is determined by state law. So the very first question, the first questions are always a citizen-initiated referendum questions, and we have one citizen-initiated referendum question. I will read it here. It is also on my website. Do you want to set a $5,000 limit for giving to political action committees that spend money independently to support or defeat candidates for office? So the second question, so bonds come after those citizen-initiated referendum questions or people's veto questions. We have 3 bonds that have been approved by the legislature and are going out to the voters for approval. Question 2, and so the order of the bonds was chosen by me picking them out of a fishbowl in a live streamed press conference where the media attended. And so question 2 is a research and development bond for $25 million. That would be for funds for research, development, and commercialization for a variety of sectors, including life sciences, biomedical technology, environmental and renewable energy technology, information technology, advanced technologies for forestry and agriculture, aquaculture and marine technology, composites and advanced materials, and precision manufacturing. That is in that question. That is the longest question on the ballot. Question 3 is a second bond. This is $10 million for restoration of historic buildings owned by governmental or nonprofit organizations. Requires a 25% match from either private or nonprofit sources. Question 4 is a $30 million bond for investment, development, and maintenance for trails, non-motorized, motorized, and multi-use trails statewide, and requires a $3 million match in private and public contributions. You might ask, who writes these questions? The legislature. The legislature writes the bond questions. I wrote the first question subject to public comment, but the legislature writes the legislative questions. Question 5, this is also a legislatively initiated question, and under the rules, these ones are always last. And this is the act to restore the former state of Maine flag. And the question reads, do you favor making the former state flag replaced as the official flag of the state in 1909 and commonly known as the pine tree flag, the official flag of the state? So that question is, do you want to replace the current Maine state flag with a new flag that is the 1901 flag that that is referred to in this bill as the pine tree flag? And if you are curious, I am going to briefly share my screen so you can see a poster that shows what a yes vote means and a no vote means. A yes vote, I hope everybody can see this, is a pine tree and the North Star on a buff background. A no vote means we keep our current flag, which is the state seal, on a blue background. Pretty easy. So stop sharing that. Those are the 5 referendum questions. So that's what's on the ballot. Lots of reasons to vote. I always say voting is not a test, or if it is, it's open book. You can take materials with you into the voting booth. You can't leave them there, but if you have a little cheat sheet in your pocket, or you have your smartphone and you want to take out your smartphone and Google, a candidate questionnaire, or the Maine Citizen Referendum Guide, which is a guide that my office publishes that details not only the questions, but the laws behind the question, the legal language that we put into the statute, the actual full details of the cost to the state, the budget for the questions, and the Attorney General's interpretation of what the legal meaning of those questions is. That's all in a guide, Citizen's Guide to the Referendums, which is on our website. You can Google Maine Citizen Guide to the Referendum Questions and get that. You can use that when you vote. You just can't play audio or video at the polling place. So if you're pulling out your smartphone to remind yourself of who you want to vote for, say for your county official race, or you were trying to research somebody real quick before you fill in those ovals, you can do so, but you can't play their videos or a podcast for other voters to hear, or potentially influence other voters in that polling place. So we've talked about voter registration. We've talked about what's on the ballot. Let's talk about voting real quick. I think this is, it was fun. I was at a forum hosted by an immigrants' rights group, and I got this question and I thought it was so great. And it was like, how do you vote? And really breaking it down. In Maine, we make it easy to vote and hard to cheat, quite frankly, because there's so many checks and balances. But how do you obtain a ballot? You can request a ballot in our online absentee ballot request system. We love this system. You can make a request by calling the clerk of your town. You can make a request by going in person. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to head out in person next week and vote in person at my local town office, because I know on election day, I'm going to be traveling the state. That's called in-person absentee voting. Maine has 30 days minimum of what we call no excuse absentee voting. And you can vote for absentee for any reason at all. You don't have to be the Secretary of State and know you're traveling on election day. You can just decide you want to get it out of the way and want to remove yourself from all these lists. I'm just going to show you real quick our online absentee ballot request system, because it's also pretty cool. So there it is, the absentee ballot request system. And again, we differentiate between those Maine voters currently living in Maine and those uniform service or overseas voters who are overseas. We also have an accessible ballot for people with print disabilities, someone who may be blind or have another sight disability. You can request an accessible ballot, which is an electronic ballot that is transmitted securely to you, that you can return securely. It allows for privacy of the ballot for those who are visually impaired and don't want to use a third person as an assistant to helping them complete the ballot. So it's really fun to request your absentee ballot. Just do it once, but there's the request form. You've got to put in all your information. I think the biggest mistake we sometimes see is people will put in, perhaps you've got a nickname and you use that as your first name, but when you registered to vote, you used your full name. You really, that name match is important. So that's the most common mistake that we see on that. And sometimes on the online voter registration service, if you're using a driver license, pull out your driver license and make sure that the name in that request matches the name on your driver license. And that's going to eliminate a lot of problems. That is the number one problem that we identify when people are contacting our office saying, your system doesn't work. No, it works. We need to verify you, and the way we do is by exact matches on all of this data. So that's how you can vote absentee. When you're returning your ballot, a lot of our towns have absentee ballot drop boxes attached to the municipal offices. So you can drop your ballot off anytime. Maybe you're commuting for work, or maybe you're caring for a loved one, and it's easiest for you to do an after hours drop off. If you're able to do that rather than the US mail, I highly recommend it, just because unfortunately we are seeing rural mail delays and even some urban mail delays across our state because of changes made by Postmaster Louis DeJoy. I and other secretaries of state from across the country, from both parties, met with the Postmaster General to express our concerns. We were not very satisfied or encouraged by the results of that meeting. But if the only way you can return your ballot is in the mail, please do, because we have the best postal workers on the ground in Maine, and we have very good relationships here in our state. They are prioritizing election mail, and they're going to do their very best to get that ballot back on time. So we'd rather that you use the mail than didn't vote. But if you've got that option to use an absentee ballot drop box or to vote absentee in person, then you're going to have the security of knowing that your ballot has been received by the clerk. But there's one other way to know whether your ballot has been received or not. We do have an online absentee ballot tracker, which is really exciting. So you can see, okay, my request has been accepted or it's been rejected. And that online absentee ballot tracker is a great way to double check the status of your request and whether the clerk has accepted it or has not accepted it. So moving on to counting of the ballots, because I realize I want to leave a little time for Q&A. I don't want to take too much time. So ranked choice voting, we have it in the presidential. We had it in 2020. A lot of folks may have forgotten that because it was so simple. And of course, as everybody knows, Maine splits our electoral college votes. So that means in Congressional District 1, there's one electoral vote allocated to whichever presidential candidate wins that congressional district. In Congressional District 2, there is one electoral vote for that congressional district. And then there are 2 additional electoral votes for the statewide winner. So in 2020, Joseph Biden received the clear majority, 50%, well over 50% in Congressional District 1 and statewide. He received 3 electoral votes. Donald Trump received well over 50% in Congressional District 2. He received 1 electoral vote. It never went to a ranked choice voting tabulation because we had that 50% plus 1 threshold. That could be different in 2024. So hold on to your seats. It is possible. So if no candidate receives that minimum 50% plus 1, then on election night, those results will be reported, right? But if somebody falls below, so they've got 49% of the vote or 48%, then those ballots and the memory devices for the tabulators used to count the ballots would come back to Augusta, and we would conduct a fully transparent ranked choice voting tabulation. Recounts are also something that we conduct after Election Day. We have very high levels of security procedures and transparency. In 2022, with our recounts and our ranked choice voting tabulation for Congressional District 2, which we were required to do, we live streamed the whole thing on Facebook. And members of the media were there as well. So those of you who like an online educational experience, you'll be able to take your lunch hours the week after the election and watch any recounts or ranked choice voting tabulation from the Secretary of State's Facebook page, or see it on your evening news. And then, of course, so clerks have, there's so many checks and balances in the process, and I'm going to try to be concise about this piece, but I'm going to close here. Clerks have, so on election night, right? Ballots aren't counted by like one person in a back room. Even the absentee ballots, those are counted on election night when the polls closed. They might be processed, meaning placed in the ballot drop box or a tabulator prior to election day, but even the processing does not happen behind closed doors with just one or two people. The clerks advertise when they're going to open the absentee ballot envelopes, and any political party or nonpartisan observer, anyone can go and examine those envelopes, make sure they're all signed and properly. The applications for the absentee ballots are attached to those envelopes. They can check those applications, check the signatures, check the envelopes. And then that opening of those ballots and feeding them into the tabulators or placing them into wooden ballot box, that happens in full view of those party observers and any member of the public who wants to be there. All ballots in Maine are counted on election night when the polls close. That's state law. Your ballot has to be in by 8 p.m. If you put it in the mail on election day, there is a high likelihood that the postal workers aren't going to be able to get it to the clerk by 8 p.m. that same day. Or if you say, oh, you know, it was postmarked on election day, not good enough. It has to be received by the clerk. When the polls close under Maine law, the wardens, who are the people in charge of the polling places on election day, they oversee the count, and the count happens immediately. Again, they're observers from all sides, nonpartisan observers, candidate observers, watching that count. And under Maine law, the people doing the election, the administration of the election on election day, they have to be recruited in equal numbers from the major political parties, Democrats and Republicans. So Democrats and Republicans are doing that count together. The warden must report the results publicly. They must post them in the polling place when the count is complete. So you have election night results. A lot of the media, the Bangor Daily, the Portland Press Herald, the AP, others, they're reporting results based on the public totals reported by the tally, reported by the wardens on election night after the polls close. That's the first step, but that's not the end of it. The next 2 business days, the clerks in each town have to go back and certify the election from the local level. They're checking who voted, and they're entering information in about the tallies to the state. We have 21 days from election day to certify the election statewide. So we have to get all the recounts done. We have to get all the ranked choice voting tabulation done. Then we have to check, and we check to make sure the numbers match. Do the number of voters reported, say in my hometown of Manchester, does the number of voters match the number of ballots? And so we're doing a final check, and we're certifying the election to the governor. And we will be delivering that certification to Congress as well. The Electoral College will meet in December. Now, I was on the Electoral College in 2020 before I was Secretary of State. So I've been part of that process. It's really fascinating. And the electors for each of the candidates who have received, who are the winners in the statewide and each of the CD, those are the ones who are meeting. So there are 4 electors in Maine. They cast the Electoral College votes, and then the Secretary of State is responsible for conveying those votes again to Congress. So I'll stop there. I'm really happy to answer questions that people might have in the time that we have. But I just have to say, so current Senator King tells a story about when he was governor of Maine, and he and then Governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura, had a standing bet as to who would be number 1. So I have a bet with the Minnesota Secretary of State, Steve Simon. I'm betting on Maine. I want to see Maine be number 1 in voter participation again in 2024. So make your plan to get registered, to get everyone that you know who is a citizen, who is a resident of our beloved state registered, and make your plan to vote so that Maine again can lead the nation in voting. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Secretary Bellows. I definitely want to see us win that bet with Minnesota. And so you can count on all of us. For everyone on this call, just a reminder, you will get a follow-up email later this afternoon with a link to the recording of this program and all of those great resources that Secretary Bellows talked about. So if you were keeping track, that's going to be the maine.gov/vote. It's going to be how to apply for an absentee ballot online, how to track your ballot, how to learn about absentee voting, what to know about voter registration, the ballot guide, plus all of the social media accounts where you can follow along with the Secretary's office and make sure that you get to watch those live streams, talk about the democracy nerds paradise, right? This is terrific. And feel free, as always, to share that email and those resources broadly. Forward it around. We want to make sure everyone has access to this terrific information. We have a bunch of great questions already. You can keep those coming to me or to Maggie through the chat, and we will get to as many of them as possible. The first thing I want to know, though, is I heard you say at the very end there, Secretary Bellows, that we should make a plan for Election Day. Lots of us who have been involved in getting out the vote before know that that's a really important step when we help people sort of walk through what is it going to look like when I cast my ballot. But what I want to know is what's your plan for Election Day? What does November 5th look like when you've already cast your ballot, but you happen to be in charge of administering or the whole thing, making sure it goes off without a hitch?
I love Election Day. It's like it's for me, it's like Christmas or Thanksgiving, which are holidays that are important to me. It's so I'll start my day early with one of the polling places in Maine that opens at 6 or 7. And there are many that do. And I'll travel the state. I will go from I will visit large and small and in between polling locations to check in and see how things are going, check in with the clerks. I'll be bringing them treats. I try to always bring treats to clerks when I'm visiting them. And I recommend that you do the same. Bring your best self, bring a smile, bring a compliment. And if you're a good baker, bring some cookies or a pie. And so I'll just be checking in and seeing how things are going. I'll be working the phones. So if there are any big picture concerns, I might receive a call about that. I will be meeting with members of the press because one of the responsibilities of the secretary is to make sure that everyone has free and fair information about what's going on. So I'll be doing a number of media appearances throughout the day. In the middle of the day, I will be visiting my extraordinary elections division. So we have a team of state election officials. They are civil service, meaning they are not partisan. And our elections director, Deputy Secretary of State, Julie Flynn, she's the longest serving elections director in the nation. She's on her 30th year in running elections. She's served under Republican Secretary of State Charlie Summers and former Democratic Secretaries of State like Matt Dunlap. She knows everything about Maine elections. So she and her team, they're going to be there at the crack of dawn, and they're going to stay well past the polls close. And they're fielding any concerns, questions with the clerks. So any towns, any polling places that have any issues whatsoever, or just questions, somebody shows up with a truck with a sign that they shouldn't, or a candidate, insists that they're allowed by law to wear their candidate, t-shirt, which they're not. The clerks can call us and we can intervene. She and her team are there fielding questions and queries from the clerks all day. Meanwhile, we have a situation room, an emergency ops situation room that Maine Emergency Management Agency will be operating on our behalf. There will be security and law enforcement and emergency management partners will be in that room. And my Deputy Secretary of State, Joanne Bautista, who is my policy advisor and a liaison for me to other governmental agencies. She will be in that room again from the crack of dawn until well after the polls close, as will my Director of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security. And they will be monitoring for any threats to elections, any, freak power outages or road closures or anything that might happen in the state that might require a cross-sector agency response. And to make sure that we've got resources on deck if necessary. Usually that situation room is pretty calm, but it's great to know that we have it, and we're really grateful for that. So I'll travel the state, and I'll start early, and all polls close at 8 p.m. So I will end at some polling place in the evening. And then usually I'm doing some late night media queries as well. People want to know, how did it go? How is the voter turnout? Of course, I won't have the voter turnout numbers because we have the gold standard in security. We do paper ballots, we do paper lists. Like, a lot of that data is data that I'll have after the fact. But I can share my observations and share what our experiences were. But it's a super fun day, really busy, a lot of driving, and a lot of treats for a lot of hardworking clerks. Because of course, it's the clerks, the wardens, and the volunteer poll workers who are actually running the election on election day. They're doing the hard work. And it's fun for me to get to stop by and say thank you to them.
I'm excited just thinking about it. I'm with you. I love election day. I love to be at the polls with my friends and neighbors. And you mentioned a few of the people that we're going to see when we do go to the polls. Will you remind me, you talked about clerks, registrars, wardens. Are those the same people? Are they different people? Remind me who's who.
So your clerks are in every single town. Well, not every single town, but every single organized town in the state has a clerk. And the clerk is the election official for your town. Every single town has a registrar. The registrar is in charge of voter registration. In some towns, the clerk and the registrar may be the same person, especially in your tiniest towns, right? Where you just have a handful of voters. Clerks may have deputy clerks. So in your larger municipalities or many municipalities, there'll be a deputy. And you might have multiple deputy clerks who are doing different aspects of election operations under the supervision of the clerk. The warden on election day is the official that is in charge of the polling place. Ideally, the clerk has a warden who is not the clerk, who is in charge on election day. There may be cases where the clerk is made the warden for staffing reasons. So it's not completely out of bounds that might happen, but it's really the warden. And they're a volunteer. They're compensated modestly, but they're in charge of the election on election day. So it's the clerk is doing the troubleshooting, kind of doing the logistical aspects of things. So the clerk would be setting up the polling place, recruiting all the volunteers, training all of the volunteers, managing the shifts, finding a substitute if someone calls out sick, managing, food for the volunteers, interceding with party representatives or nonpartisan poll watchers or whomever, making sure that the registration table or the registration that's happening, whether that's at the polls or back at the clerk's office, is going well. So they're kind of managing all of the logistics. And the warden, however, is the official that's in charge of the proceeding that's happening inside the polling place itself. So they're making sure, voters aren't accidentally playing video from their iPhones to remind themselves of who they want to vote for in the polling place. They have the power to have someone removed if someone's disruptive or does something that is not legitimate. And they're making the call if there's any question or dispute. They're in charge of the polling place itself and the voting that's happening in the polling place and the tabulation that's happening after the polls close. So, great question.
It is really remarkable how many people are part of this process. It really is all hands on deck, right? We get to do this together. And so a few questions about just how much we can do together. We have someone on the call today who shared my mother's first language is not English. Can I go into the voting booth with her? Can I help make sure she understands what she's voting on?
Voters have a right to an interpreter. So yes, you can provide assistance. You want to coordinate with the clerk ahead of time on how that's going to happen, because what you can't do is influence any other voters, and you can't tell someone how to vote. So you and your mother might be really close, but you can't say, hey, mom, remember you wanted to vote for this person? Or, hey, mom, we're going to vote. We in our house are all voting this way. What you can literally say, and my Spanish is not as good as it was when I was in the Peace Corps in Panama, but you can only literally translate the ballot. So, usted está en apoyo de hacer la bandera del estado. That's really bad Spanish. But that I'm literally reading and translating the question to the best of my ability, word for word. And that is all the interpreter can do, is a word for word translation. The interpreter cannot say, do you want the ugly flag or the beautiful flag? Right? Or, or make any indication of, how to vote. They can't even tell them information. Like if they're like, say mom says, well, who's Donald Trump? Who's Kamala Harris? Who's Chase Oliver? Who's Cornel West? Who's Jill Stein? You can't say that's this person, or that's this person, or that's this person. You are translating the words.
And what if, I really appreciated you went through how the actual logistics of how we use ranked choice voting. What if we're confused in either because we're working with as an interpreter for someone who's confused, or we ourselves are like, I can't remember what the secretary said about that. What am I supposed to do? Can we ask for help, or what should we do?
So there's a poster that will be in every polling place. There are 2 posters. They are in English. The translator can literally translate the words on the posters. Sorry, you are not going to be able to see the posters that I'm holding up. But trust me, there'll be 2 posters. And one of them is how, like, the do's and don'ts. You can see the green check mark and the red no's. So the do's and don'ts of a ranked choice voting ballot, and the do's and don'ts of how to fill out your ballot. So these 2 posters will be in every polling place, in every voting booth. But if you're helping someone vote absentee, you can certainly, go online. The cautionary point that I made about interpretation, it's because you can't influence a voter in the polling place, right? So you can certainly have lots of materials, use our website or print materials from our website at your local library and make them available to someone. But we'd have guides on how to complete a ballot, guides on how to complete a ranked choice vote ballot. We also have a voter lookup on our website. So if you don't know, maybe you're in a larger municipality and you're not really sure where you vote or who your clerk is or how to reach them, we have a Maine voter information lookup service. So you can just, Google Maine voter lookup, and you will see this page that you just put your municipality, and then so I would put Manchester. I'm not going to do this. And then you just put your street number and the street name, hit go, and it will give you all of the information that you need to know. Actually, just for fun, maybe I'll see if the sample ballots. So yeah, next question.
All right. So speaking of absentee ballots, if I'm helping, or if can I drop somebody's absentee ballot off for them?
You can drop your immediate family member's ballot. So they're living in your household and they are related to you, a spouse, a child, parent. But if it is a third person, so someone that's not related to the voter has to complete an application that is designating that third person to return the ballot on their behalf. So you want to help, as long as, and by the way, candidates can't do this, period. But if you want to help your next door neighbor, they're housebound, they live alone, they want to fill the ballot out by hand. They want it returned by you. They have to complete an application requesting an absentee ballot and designating you as the person that they want to return that ballot. And that has to be signed by them. And then you have to document on the envelope itself, you're signing, the voter signing that, that it's you. So the clerk is making sure that the voter is designating someone. This is what prevents ballot harvesting. So you can't just go door to door, pick up some ballots and bring them back to the clerk's office.
And when I do drop off my own absentee ballot, we'll say, should I drop it in the box outside
Yep.
town office, or is it better to go inside and put it in the clerk's hands?
I think a lot of the clerks would just appreciate it if you put it in the Dropbox. They are checking that daily, sometimes more frequently than that. And that helps them keep organized, and you're not interrupting them in the middle of a busy day. Those things are very secure. Early on in my tenure as secretary, we had a special election in the winter and a snowplow hit a drop box. We were able to get the ballots out and not a single one was damaged. So telling you, those things are secure.
This is not about Maine, but many of us are watching what the just absolute devastation in North Carolina and wondering a lot of things that folks there need, a lot of resources, but they also need to be able to vote in about a month. Have you talked to your peers? What's the plan in North Carolina to make sure that everybody who wants to vote can?
I'm going to say first and foremost, I have complete confidence in my peers all across the country. We may agree to disagree on voting rights policies. Maine is one of only 2 states in the nation where every United States citizen who's a resident of the state can vote, no exceptions, including people who are incarcerated. I'm very proud of that. A lot of my peers disagree with that policy. I think there are valid disagreements on policy, but on election administration and making sure that every eligible citizen in your state who's an eligible voter has the right to vote and cast their ballot and ensure their ballot's counted. I have 100% confidence in my colleagues in North Carolina. 100% confidence. Interestingly enough, the Secretary of State isn't in charge of elections in North Carolina. They have a different system, and they run their elections at the county level. And I have a good friend who serves with me on the National Executive Committee of the Election Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center. He is an IT director in one of the most hard-hit counties there. And I spoke with him yesterday. They're in good spirits. They are working really hard to restore service, restore access, and they're laser focused on ensuring a successful election with successful ballot delivery and return. So I will just reassure everyone that the best of the best minds and hearts are working on this, including people that I know personally. And I know that they're as committed as we are to making sure that every eligible North Carolinian can vote. And I will say, I was talking to another colleague who he runs elections in Florida at a county level that often gets hit by hurricanes. And he was talking to me about the supports that those counties that have experienced really major hurricanes close to an election have done in the past, those emergency procedures, and how that knowledge is getting shared with North Carolina, with some others. So I think there are a lot of good folks on the ground, and all of us here in Maine should rest assured. I said, anything you need? And he said, just send all your love. Just send all that virtual love to North Carolina.
Oh, we can do that. And I just want to say thank you, because you're right. It doesn't feel like we should be in any that we shouldn't disagree about voting access, but it's a good reminder that even when we have policy differences, there are good people trying to make sure that everyone has the right to vote. So thank you for that. We have a bunch of questions. We always have a bunch of questions that we can't get to, and we could just chat all day. But I do want to let everybody go in just a moment. So if you have questions that we didn't get to, please just respond to that follow-up email that you'll get this afternoon. Maggie does a phenomenal job of organizing your questions, and we can share those with Secretary Bellows and her whole team and get the answers back out to all of you. Thank you for being engaged in our democracy. Thank you for voting. Thank you, Secretary Bellows, for being with us today and for the work you do every day. And know that our love is going to you and your team and to election officials all over the country. So with that, I hope everyone has just a wonderful weekend. Look for the follow-up email later this afternoon, and we will see you back here next week.
Thank you so much, Secretary.